Emily Carter's fingers were raw from scrubbing the same countertop for the third time that morning. The old diner she'd inherited from her father, Carter's Grill, still smelled faintly of burnt bacon and lemon cleaner. Once a buzzing cornerstone of Rosewood's main street, now it echoed with emptiness. Only 3 customers sat scattered across the booths, 2 retirees and a silent trucker nursing cold coffee. Emily's eyes flicked to the electric bill peeking from her apron. Final notice. Again. She sighed, brushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear. 18 months ago, she'd been a pediatric nurse in Chicago. She had a life, a fiancé, a future. But when her father suffered a debilitating stroke, she left it all behind to run his beloved diner. What was supposed to be just for a little while had become her everyday. Now the roof leaked when it rained, the fryer made strange noises, and the town's economy, crippled after the mill closed, offered no lifelines. But Emily couldn't quit. Carter's wasn't just a restaurant, it was her father's legacy, the place where she learned to pour coffee and dream big. And even as it slowly crumbled, she refused to let go. Not yet. The bell above the door gave a half-hearted jingle, the kind that once meant good tips and full booths. Now it only made Emily flinch. She looked up from the register where she was tallying up another dismal morning and saw him. He was massive, easily 6'4", broad-shouldered, dressed in faded black leather that looked like it had been rained on, sun-baked and scarred by decades on the road. His beard was steel gray, tangled and wild, and old tattoos crawled like worn maps along his forearms. But it wasn't his presence that stilled the diner. It was the patch on his vest. Hell's Angels. The air thickened. Conversation stalled. The only sound was the creaking of his boots on the worn linoleum floor as he made his way slowly to the farthest stool at the counter. Emily could practically feel the whispers crawling up the walls. Old Mrs. Fletcher lowered her coffee cup mid-sip. Rick, the town plumber, pretended to study the pie display case. And Tina, her part-time waitress, vanished into the kitchen like smoke. Emily's heart thudded, not because she was afraid, but because she'd seen that patch before. She knew what people around here thought it meant. Trouble, crime, danger. But all she saw when he sat down was the same kind of exhaustion her father wore during chemo treatments. The sag in the shoulders. The way the hands trembled slightly as he reached for the laminated menu. The hospital bracelet peeking from under his sleeve. "Coffee?" she asked, forcing a calm into her voice she didn't feel. The man didn't look up right away. When he did, his eyes startled her. Pale blue and bloodshot, with a raw pain behind them that words couldn't carry. "Black, as strong as you've got," he said, voice quiet, almost gentle. "And anything fast. Been riding since before sunrise." She nodded and reached for the percolator, heart pounding. As she poured, she couldn't stop glancing at his hands. Scraped knuckles, fingers stained with oil and road grime, but wrapped carefully around the ceramic mug like it was the only warmth left in the world. He didn't touch the menu. Emily didn't ask questions. She'd learned during her nursing days that sometimes silence was the kindest language. But as she slid a plate of scrambled eggs and toast toward him, she couldn't help herself. "Long ride ahead of you still?" He blinked, slow. Then with a voice hoarse from more than just road dust, he said, "Actually, heading back. Riverside Hospital. My daughter. She's..." The words broke like a wave. "She's not doing great." Emily swallowed. She recognized that crack in his voice, had heard it too many times outside ICU waiting rooms. The way a parent says, "my daughter," like it's the last lifeline they have in the world. "I'll put your food in now," she said softly, her voice catching just a bit. "Fastest on the menu. 6 minutes. Hang tight." He gave the smallest nod, but the tightness in his jaw loosened. She turned, and that's when they walked in. Deputy Clark and Officer Reynolds, 2 local cops with nothing better to do on a slow Thursday afternoon. They strolled in, all authority and suspicion, and their eyes locked on the biker like bees to spilled soda. "Well, well," Reynolds said loudly, taking a seat 1 stool over from the biker. "Don't see many of your kind around here." Emily flinched. The biker said nothing, just took another sip of his coffee. Clark smirked. "Passing through, huh? On business or just spreading bad news?" The biker finally looked up. His eyes didn't flicker. Just trying to eat. That a problem? No problem, Reynolds said, but his hand was already resting near his belt, too close to his holster for Emily's comfort. That's when the past few years, the lost career, the hospital visits, the lonely nights balancing bills, boiled over in Emily. That's enough, she said, stepping between them before she could think twice. He hasn't done anything wrong. Clark raised an eyebrow. You sure you know who you're defending, Miss Carter? Emily didn't blink. I know he's tired, hungry, and polite. That's more than I can say for some people. The diner went dead quiet. The biker slowly put his fork down. It's okay, he murmured. But Emily shook her head. No, it's not. Not in my diner. Reynolds stood up, towering over her. You sure your daddy would want you siding against the law? Emily's chest tightened at the mention of her father. He taught me to treat people like people, she said, and to never back down from what's right. The biker stood too then, quietly. I'll pay and go. You won't, Emily said. You'll eat. It's on the house. He looked at her like she'd just handed him something precious. Clark scoffed. This town remembers, Emily. I hope it remembers this, she shot back. The officers left, slamming the door behind them, and in the silence that followed, the biker whispered, I'm Rye. Emily, she replied. Thank you, he said, voice thick. For what? She asked. For not looking away. Emily Carter watched from behind the counter as Rye disappeared down Main Street, his bike roaring low like a growl swallowed by distance. For a few seconds, she stood still, heart still thudding in her chest. She'd meant every word. But now that it was over, the weight of what she'd done came crashing down. The other customers avoided her eyes. Rick mumbled something about getting back to work and tossed a few bills on the counter. Mrs. Fletcher stood stiffly, leaving without her usual tip. The bell jingled behind them, but this time, it didn't sound cheerful. It sounded like a warning bell. By the time the diner closed that evening, Emily had only made enough to cover the gas bill, not both it and the power. She sat at the empty booth near the window, hands cupped around a half-drunk cup of coffee, the silence pressing in like static. That night, she visited her father at the care home like always. He didn't respond as usual, his eyes unfocused, his once strong hands resting limp on the blankets. But she still talked to him. I think I might have ruined everything today, Dad, she whispered, brushing his hair back gently. But I couldn't just let them treat him like that. You would have hated it. There was no response, just the soft, rhythmic beep of the monitor. But for a fleeting second, Emily thought she saw his lips twitch. Hope or hallucination, it didn't matter. She needed to believe someone in her corner still believed in her. The next morning, she woke early and walked to the diner in the chilly mist of dawn. That's when she saw it. Taped crudely to the glass door, a sheet of paper with black block letters that screamed, "No biker sympathizers in Rosewood." Underneath, someone had scrawled in red marker, "Traitor." Emily stared at it, frozen. The wind rustled the paper. Her hands trembled as she tore it down and crumpled it, but the ache in her chest stayed. Inside, everything looked the same. The faded booths, the scuffed linoleum. But the energy was different, colder. When Tina arrived for her shift, she hesitated at the door. You okay? She asked cautiously. Emily just nodded. Yeah, just some coward with a Sharpie. But she wasn't okay. The morning rush came and went, or rather, trickled in and out. 2 customers, then silence. By lunch it was worse. No one. Just Emily and the hum of the refrigerator. She tried to stay busy, scrubbing the same counter, refilling napkin dispensers that didn't need it, but her throat tightened every time the door didn't open. She thought about the rumors, how quickly kindness could turn to betrayal in a small town, how standing up for the wrong person, at least the person the town thought was wrong, could make you an outsider in your own home. She told herself she didn't regret it. She told herself it was worth it. But that didn't make the fear of losing the diner, of losing her father's legacy, any less real. Then at 2:14 p.m., the door opened. Not a regular, not someone she knew. A man tall and broad, older than Rye, stepped in. His beard was trimmed, and his jacket was worn but clean, Pinned to his collar was a small silver emblem, wings behind a skull, another Hell's Angel. Emily stiffened, but the man smiled gently and removed his cap. "You Emily Carter?" he asked. "I am," she replied, cautious. "I'm Thomas, Rye's brother," he said, extending his hand. "This is my wife, Sarah." The woman who followed looked equally weathered but kind, her silver braid draped over one shoulder. Emily shook their hands, trying to hide the worry creeping up her spine. "Rye told us what you did for him," Sarah said. "He's still at Riverside with Jessie. That's his daughter." Emily softened. "How's she doing?" "Stage 4. They're trying an experimental treatment," Thomas replied. "Still early, but—" Rye said he felt more hope after yesterday than he had in months. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat. "He seemed like a good man." "He is," Sarah nodded. "Not perfect, but a damn good father." There was a pause. Then Thomas glanced around the empty diner. "You stood up for him when no one else would. That's not nothing." "Well, it's starting to cost me," Emily said, unable to hide the tremble in her voice. "Some people around here don't like it when you treat bikers like human beings." "That's about to change," Thomas said quietly. Emily blinked. "What do you mean?" But before he could answer, the sound started. Low at first, like a distant swarm. Then it grew. A rumble. A thunder. Motorcycles. Dozens. Emily moved to the window and gasped. The street was filling with bikers. Men and women, some grizzled, some young, all rolling in steadily and lining up outside her diner. The roar of engines became a steady hum of solidarity. By the time they parked in the vacant lot next door, there were hundreds. Sarah grinned. "We called a few chapters, told them what you did. They wanted to return the favor." Emily's jaw dropped. "All of them." "For this?" Thomas smiled. "Rye said you reminded him of Jessie. Said you've got a fire in you. So yeah, this is for you." And just like that, the door opened again, and the first biker stepped inside. Emily Carter had never seen anything like it. The street outside Carter's Grill, usually a ghost town after lunch, was now packed shoulder to shoulder with chrome and leather. Motorcycles gleamed in the sunlight like rows of polished steel horses. The roar of engines quieted one by one as riders dismounted, some stretching after long rides, others removing helmets to reveal weathered faces, tattoos, and eyes filled with curiosity. But what shocked Emily most wasn't the sheer number of them. It was their calm, their respect. They didn't storm in. They waited. They lined up politely outside the diner, many tipping their heads in greeting as they passed the windows. She stood frozen behind the counter, heart pounding. This place that had been a tomb just hours ago was now the center of something bigger, something that moved with a kind of reverence. A large man stepped inside first. Gray beard, gold rings, and a vest that read, "Riverside Chapter, President." "You must be Emily," he said warmly, extending a hand. "Name's Marcus. Rye's one of ours. Been riding with him 20 years. Emily shook his hand automatically, barely able to find her voice. "This is a lot," Marcus chuckled. "Word travels fast when it's about family, and you treated Rye like a brother when no one else would." "I just gave him coffee and let him eat," she said quietly. "You gave him dignity," Marcus replied. "Don't undersell that." Behind him, more bikers entered. Booths filled up. Bar stools, too. When there were no seats left, riders stood along the walls, still patient, still respectful. Emily's mind spun. "I don't even have enough food." "Already handled," said a voice behind her. It was Sarah Mercer again, now holding a clipboard. "Called your supplier this morning. Delivery's on the way. Paid in full." "But how?" "You helped our family," Thomas said simply. "This is how we help back." Within 20 minutes, crates of eggs, loaves of bread, boxes of coffee grounds, sacks of potatoes, and pounds of meat began arriving from local distributors. Some of the bikers formed a chain, unloading them with practiced efficiency. Others asked if she had aprons they could borrow. It felt like a dream. Tina, the part-time waitress who had ghosted earlier, showed up red-faced and out of breath. "Saw it on Facebook. Thought you might need help," she mumbled. Emily handed her an apron. "Get ready. We've got a full house. And they did. Every table filled twice over. Riders came in waves. Some ordered big breakfasts, even though it was afternoon. Some just wanted coffee and pie. All paid in cash. Most tipped more than double. And then something incredible began to happen. Regular customers trickled in. First was Mr. Hawkins, the retired teacher who once told Emily bikers were vagabonds with louder engines than brains. He froze at the doorway, unsure whether to enter. A biker near the window stood up and waved him over. "Seats warm. Best meatloaf in town, I hear." Then came the Brennans, a couple from the local hardware store. They hesitated until one of the bikers offered to pull up another chair. They sat, then Mrs. Fletcher, then Dave Wilson, then two high schoolers. One by one, people filtered in, uncertain, curious, and they were met not with hostility, but with stories, laughter, and open seats. Emily passed a booth and overheard a biker grandmother named Luann showing Mrs. Henderson pictures of her 8 grandkids. "This one's an ROTC," she said proudly, tapping a photo of a girl in uniform. 2 booths over, Dave Wilson found himself in a deep conversation with a man named Pete, a biker with a Vietnam veteran patch on his vest. "You were in '69? Pete asked. "'70, Dave replied. "'Cambodia." The 2 men shook hands with understanding that needed no words. Even Principal Owens, a man who once scolded Emily for having loud company near the diner, ended up chatting with a biker named Paul, who, it turned out, taught sociology part-time at a community college. By late afternoon, someone had pulled out a Bluetooth speaker. Classic rock echoed in the background. Another biker rolled up with a portable grill and offered to cook overflow orders. Children from the neighborhood gathered around the motorcycles outside, their eyes wide, their laughter unfiltered. What began as a stand against cruelty had become a festival of connection. At one point, Emily looked up and spotted Officer Taylor near the doorway, radio in hand, clearly unsure if he was there as law enforcement or just a curious local. He stepped inside cautiously, but no one moved against him. Instead, someone offered him a water and asked if he liked ribs. Even he cracked a smile. In the midst of the beautiful chaos, Emily finally found Rye. He stood in the doorway, looking exhausted but calm. His eyes met hers, and he gave a small, knowing smile. "Hope you don't mind," he said. "Brought a few friends." Emily laughed, the sound catching in her throat like a bird finally taking flight. "You're all welcome here." She meant it. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, her diner was alive. Not just with customers, but with purpose, with unity, with something she hadn't seen in Rosewood in a long time. Hope. And in that moment, surrounded by strangers who had become family, Emily Carter realized something beautiful. She hadn't just saved her diner. She'd changed her town. The last plate had been cleared. The final coffee poured. The grill was off, the windows fogged with the heat of 1,000 conversations. And the once empty Carter's grill now bore the scent of hope. Cinnamon pie, coffee, leather, and healing. Emily Carter stood behind the counter, fingers aching, apron stained with flour, grease, and joy. She hadn't sat down in hours, but her heart was full. For the first time in years, her father's diner wasn't fading. It was thriving. The last of the bikers trickled out, offering handshakes, shoulder squeezes, and promises to return. "First Saturday of every month," one rider shouted as he walked backward through the door. "Put it on your calendar, Em." Emily smiled, her throat tight with something close to tears. Rye Mercer lingered in the doorway, helmet under his arm. His beard caught the late sun like silver threads. He looked different than he had just 24 hours ago. Tired, still, but lighter. Less haunted. "She wants to meet you," he said suddenly. Emily blinked. "Your daughter?" He nodded. "Jessie. She's still at Riverside, but the new treatment, her numbers are improving. She said she wants to meet the woman who stood up for her old man." Emotion caught her off guard. "I'd be honored." Rye gave a small, rough chuckle. "She says you remind her of her mom. Stubborn, brave, a little dangerous." "I'll take that as a compliment," Emily said, her voice shaky with something deeper than just gratitude. They hugged, brief but real. When Rye stepped back, he placed something on the counter, a thick envelope and a slip of paper. "Just a little something," he said. From everyone. Before she could protest, he was gone. The door jingled softly behind him. Emily opened the envelope. Inside were receipts, dozens of them. Every single biker had left cash payments far above what they owed. The tips alone were enough to pay off 2 months of rent. She stared in disbelief. The slip of paper read, in bold, blocky handwriting, "Tell your dad we said thanks for raising someone with a backbone." Her hands trembled as she placed the note beside the old photo of her father that hung above the register. Frank Carter in his apron, smiling beside the same coffee machine she used today. She whispered, "We did it, Dad." That night, as the sky turned violet and street lamps flickered on across sleepy Rosewood, Emily visited her father again. The care center was quiet, save for the soft humming of oxygen machines and the shuffling of nurses in rubber soles. She sat beside his bed, fingers curled gently around his. "I think the town is changing," she whispered. "Not because of me, because they finally saw people they'd ignored for too long. And they saw me too, Dad. Not just your daughter, but me." His eyes flickered, or maybe she imagined it again. It didn't matter. The next morning, Emily arrived early at the diner. The sun was still rising, streaks of gold and coral washing the pavement in warmth. She stopped short at the front door. Propped against the entryway was a large flat box wrapped in brown paper. No address, no tape, just a sticker on top with her name in thick, marker-scrawled letters. "To the bravest diner owner we know." Heart pounding, she brought it inside and carefully peeled it open. Inside was a leather vest, black, sturdy, hand-stitched. On the back, in rich golden thread, were the words, "Carter's Grill, Friends of the Angels." Beneath that, in smaller cursive, was a final line. "Respect is earned, and you earned ours." Pinned to the collar was a silver angel wing charm and a small handwritten note on lined paper. "Jessie's doing better. She still wants to meet you. This vest, it's not about being one of us. It's about standing tall when no one else will." Rye. Emily's hands shook as she held the vest to her chest. It smelled like leather and gasoline and road dust. It smelled like defiance and family. She walked over to the wall behind the counter where her father's apron still hung, frayed but proud. Right beside it, she hammered a nail into the wood and hung the vest. A tribute, a symbol, a promise. Later that morning, Officer Brennan came in, alone, no swagger, no partner. He looked different, too, less sure of himself. He didn't speak at first, just stood at the counter. Emily served him a black coffee in silence. He finally cleared his throat. "Good crowd yesterday." Emily nodded. "They came a long way." He hesitated. "It was, something to see." There was a long pause. Then in a voice that surprised even him, he added, "You were right. About how we treat people." Emily offered a small, practiced smile. "Coffee's on the house." "No," Brennan said quickly. "I'll pay." And he did. As he walked out, Emily turned and glanced at the vest on the wall. It was a reminder that sometimes when you stand for one person, you don't just change a moment. You change everything around it. The town, the hearts, the future. Courage, after all, doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes with grease stains, tired feet, and the courage to stand still while the world learns to catch up. And sometimes it comes with a vest. The vest stayed on the wall behind the counter, right beside Frank Carter's apron. Customers noticed. Some asked about it. Others just nodded with quiet understanding. But to Emily, it was more than leather and thread. It was a testament to what courage looks like when no one is watching. Days passed, then weeks. The whispers that once followed her in the grocery store softened. Old regulars trickled back in. Some apologized. Some didn't. But it didn't matter. The diner was alive again. And more than that, it was respected. The first Saturday of the next month, they returned. Dozens of bikes rumbled into Rosewood. Locals didn't gawk this time. They waved. Kids high-fived riders as they parked. And inside the diner, laughter filled the booths as strangers turned friends, shared stories, memories, and pie. Later that afternoon, Emily stood outside, watching as Rye and Jessie approached. Jessie, pale but smiling, leaned on her father's arm. When she reached Emily, she didn't speak. She simply hugged her. That moment, soft, wordless, meant more than anything. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops and the engines roared once more, Emily knew something had changed, not just in the town, but in her. Sometimes the biggest revolutions don't come from speeches or headlines. They come from one person doing the right thing, quietly, fiercely. One plate of eggs, one cup of coffee, one stand that tells the world everyone deserves dignity. And when that happens, even the loudest engines grow quiet to listen. Life lesson: respect isn't worn, it's earned. In a world that's quick to judge by appearances, it's easy to turn away from what we don't understand. But Emily Carter's story reminds us of something deeper, that true character isn't measured by uniforms, titles, or the patches on a leather jacket. It's shown in how we treat people when there's nothing to gain. She didn't plan to become a hero. She just chose compassion over comfort, kindness over conformity. And because of that, she didn't just save a struggling diner. She challenged an entire town to see people for who they really are. The next time you find yourself in a moment where it's easier to stay silent, ask yourself, what would happen if I stood up? Maybe nothing at first. Or maybe, like Emily, you'll start a ripple that changes everything. Because the truth is, courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just serves coffee with a steady hand and a brave heart. Judge less, listen more, and never underestimate the power of one small act of decency.